I came back because I still believed family mattered. Not in the way people talk about blood being thicker than water. No, it was simpler than that. I thought if I showed up, maybe they'd remember I still existed. That I had built something, survived something, mattered. The gala was in Austin, at one of those private venues that reeked of polished ambition. Marble floors, oversized chandeliers, men with cufflinks shaped like dollar signs, and women who looked like they never sweated a day in their lives. I wore black, not because it was elegant, but because it felt like armor. No one really greeted me. Some glanced up, offered a tight smile, then looked away like they were trying to place where they'd seen me. A server holding a tray of champagne actually asked, "Are you here with someone?" I said, "No. I'm here for the family." He blinked, then walked off like that made less sense than it should have. My name wasn't on the guest list. The woman checking names just raised an eyebrow. "Sloan, you said? Are you a +1? I showed her the invite I printed from the email. She scanned it, forced a grin, and mumbled something about oversight. Inside, everything looked like a tribute to someone else's life. I caught a glimpse of Blythe across the room. My sister. She looked sharp, confident, already surrounded by the usual inner circle. She saw me, offered a nod, but her eyes were empty. I gave her a polite wave. She didn't bother returning it. A distant cousin passed by, the one who married well and now acts like royalty. He smiled too wide. "Still traveling, huh? You're like Carmen Sandiego or something." I laughed stiffly. Not quite. No one asked what I'd been working on. No one cared about my business, my life, my years of building something from scratch. They asked things like, "Still in tech?" or "Are you back for good or just visiting?" Surface level. Safe. As if real questions might burn their tongues. I reminded myself I didn't come here for them. I came for closure. Or maybe hope. Then came the moment that cracked it all open. Dinner had settled, drinks flowed freely, and my mother, Lorraine, took the stage. She had a microphone in one hand and her signature smirk in the other. She was talking about gratitude, about family legacies. And then, she glanced toward my table. "Oh, look who decided to show up," she said, voice sweet but sharp. "Neria's here, must be free drinks tonight." The laughter hit fast and wide. A ripple. Then a wave. Dozens of people turning to look at me. Some laughed like they didn't know better. Some just watched. I didn't move. Just gripped my glass tighter. Forced my lips into a half smile, the kind that said I was used to swallowing things that didn't taste right. Inside, I could feel the blood rise. But I didn't give them anything more than that smile. They were waiting for a reaction. I gave them silence. But silence burns too. Later, they ran a slideshow. A tribute to family achievements. Pictures of the company. Photos of campaigns and branding from years ago. Logos I designed. Taglines I wrote. All credited to Blythe. There she was on the screen, smiling next to mock-ups I remembered sketching at midnight in my old apartment. No one mentioned my name. Not once. Someone behind me whispered, "I didn't know Blythe was a designer." I didn't turn around. I didn't say a word. But something inside cracked. Not just ignored. Erased. That's what they did. They didn't forget me. They needed me gone. And I saw my father, Randall, watching from the far table. He didn't laugh. Didn't clap. Just sat there, hands folded. He still wore the silver handkerchief I gave him when I was 16. The one he said he'd never lose. And then I saw them, posters, billboards, banners. My designs. My layouts. Except now they were signed Blythe Sloan, creative director. A title she wore like a crown on every corner of that room. My stomach clenched. I pulled out my old tablet, the one I kept with me through every move, and opened the archived drafts. The lines were exact. The palette. The tagline. My handwriting, digitally refined, but still mine. There was no mistake. I logged into the company's server out of reflex. Or maybe desperation. But the system bounced me back, access denied. My admin credentials, gone. I tried retrieving archived emails. The system returned a flat message, no records found. Like I had never typed a single word on their server. I stood there staring at a screen that used to be mine, heart tight. Then I saw Jordan, an old coworker, walking through the hallway. We made eye contact. He looked away. I stepped toward him. Jordan. You remember I used to. He cut in too quickly. I thought you moved on, Neria. You were always kinda quiet. Quiet. Like silence was an excuse to erase someone. That's when it clicked. This wasn't negligence. It was deliberate. They didn't lose my work. They buried it. I stayed longer than I should've. Maybe I wanted confirmation. Maybe I hoped someone would say my name. Then a customer walked in. She was greeted with wide smiles, especially from Blythe, who strolled out in heels like she owned the floor. This here, she said, pointing to a custom display I recognized down to the tape mark on the frame, was my breakthrough project during the pandemic. She didn't look at me. But she knew I was there. That setup had cost me 3 sleepless nights and a second-degree burn from the soldering iron. I still have the scar behind my wrist. The customer turned to me. You new here? I smiled just enough to not show my teeth. You could say that. I walked past the display into the back room, my feet moving on memory. There, on the far wall, hung the legacy wall, a timeline of family contributions. Pictures lined the board. Campaigns. Projects. Celebrations. I was in none of them after 2018. Not even a ghost. One image, centered like a trophy, showed Blythe standing next to a national rollout I led from scratch. The caption? Blythe Sloan's visionary leadership. I reached out and touched the frame. It was cold. They hadn't replaced me. They'd rewritten me out. I stood still, breathing through the ache. Then a line came to me, not from anger, but clarity. Silence isn't strength when it becomes a grave. I walked out without a word. Outside, the light was sharp. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. You don't win this with screaming. You win this with receipts. That's when the shift happened. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was preparing. I went back to my apartment, pulled out old hard drives, backup folders, contracts I'd scanned years ago and forgotten. I started calling people I hadn't spoken to in years. One of them, a mentor from when I was just starting out, had offered me a job back then. I said no then. I said yes now. I packed a bag, sent a note to my landlord, and booked a short stay 2 towns over. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing to say. A day later, I stood at a bus station waiting for the next departure. Above me, a billboard loomed. My work. My colors. My structure. Her name. I whispered under my breath, low and clear. It's not yours anymore, Blythe. And soon, everyone will know. They stole my work. They erased my name. But they forgot one thing: I remember everything. I chose a place with no photographs on the walls, no familiar creak in the floorboards. An Airbnb in a quiet Dallas suburb, gray walls, one window, a couch that wasn't trying to remember anyone. That was the point. I didn't want memory. I wanted neutrality. A space where my absence had no echo. I kept the lights low and heated a microwaved dinner I barely tasted. People think running from home feels like freedom. It doesn't. It feels like taking off an old coat and realizing the cold is worse than the weight. I sat at the small kitchen table, laptop open, replaying my voice memos from old design projects, not out of nostalgia, but survival. I needed to remind myself I once built things that mattered. Then I clicked a file I didn't recognize: Dad's 62nd birthday. I must have saved it by accident years ago. The audio crackled, then laughter, my father's voice. She always takes herself too seriously, he said. No one told her to work weekends. More laughter followed, my mother's, then Blythe's. Blythe added, I cleaned up her last pitch anyway. She should thank me. I thought that night they were worried I hadn't shown up. I used to tell myself that maybe they cared, just badly. But there it was, evidence that the story I told myself was a lie. They weren't wondering where I was. They were amused I wasn't there. It's strange how grief can shapeshift. I'd mourned their approval for years. But listening to that recording, I understood I wasn't grieving family. I was grieving fantasy. Later that night, my phone lit up. A message from Sarah, the intern I once trained. She sent a screenshot of the family group chat. My name showed up between laughing emojis. Let her run out of money. She'll crawl back. She always needed an audience. One of my uncles wrote, silence is her way of begging to be chased. Sarah added, I'm sorry. I didn't feel right not telling you. I stared at those words. Not a single tear. Just a quiet confirmation. It's one thing to feel forgotten, it's another to be mocked for leaving. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside into the rain. No umbrella. I needed the sting. I walked along the curb, shoes soaking through, thinking about how long I'd chosen patience, dignity, restraint, belief that silence was moral. But if the storm is what lives inside your house, staying quiet isn't grace. It's surrender. My grandmother once told me, when people don't clap for you, clap anyway. You're not applause-starved, you're memory-starved. I never understood what she meant until now. Back inside, I plugged in my old external drives. Folders opened, timestamps, drafts, sketches. They thought deleting me from their server was the end. They forgot about my backups. I created a new main folder on my desktop, The Cost of Silence. Inside it, subfolders by year, campaign, slogan. I wasn't just gathering files. I was gathering proof of existence. I opened a fresh document. Typed the first line. They erased me. But they did not expect me to remember. Then I stopped, staring at the cursor. My hands didn't shake this time. They anchored. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about authorship. They thought I walked away in defeat. What I did was step back and load the evidence. Late afternoon light poured through the high glass windows of Cameron Voss's law office. The place smelled like old leather and lavender oil, and every surface gleamed like it had something to prove. I walked through the lobby with a tight jaw and steady pace, like someone arriving for a negotiation, not a breakdown. That was the goal. Cameron met me at the door of her office, calm as always, her eyes sharp and unreadable. She motioned to a desk where a thick leather notebook waited, dark brown, gold-embossed lettering, Hale Family Trust, 2019 draft. "I need you to see this," she said. I nodded. No words. My breath was even, but my palms were damp. This wasn't therapy. But in the picture, my name was nowhere. Just Blythe's business card, taped under it. Outstanding Achievement, Blythe Carson 2018. My chest tightened. Not from surprise, this wasn't surprise anymore. This was the quiet fury of a person watching their life swallowed and rewritten. "She never even knew what rendering software I used," I muttered. Cameron leaned in. "The first step to fighting gaslight is facing the documentation. They didn't just ignore your work. They rebranded it." I stood and paced the office, every step bringing back memories, long nights, skipped holidays, blueprints rolled tight with pride. Now they were history for hire. On the drive home, I rolled down the windows, let the wind cut through the heat in my face. Flashbacks rushed me, emails I never sent, credits never claimed, voices in meetings talking over mine like I was a whisper. Grisham had said it once, if you don't tell your story, someone else will rewrite it for their benefit. He wasn't wrong. That night, I opened my laptop again, opened backups from years past, raw files, emails with timestamps, side sketches no one else had. I opened a secure drive and began sorting folders by project name. Cameron was right, I didn't need drama. I needed evidence. I found a silver handkerchief in my purse, folded, worn, still mine. My father's gift, years ago. Maybe he forgot what it meant. I hadn't. That night I typed one sentence in my notes app: "This is not a war for revenge. It's a return to authorship." Then I hit send on a new email to Cameron. Subject: Equity Acquisition. Body: Please proceed with a 5% share purchase in Hale Holdings. Silent stake. Irrevocable. I closed my laptop. A few minutes later, my phone lit up. Family group chat. Board meeting tomorrow. Everyone present. I smiled for the first time that week. Tomorrow, they'd see me. Not as someone returning. Not as someone asking for a seat. But as someone who already owned part of the table. I stepped into that boardroom like I'd stepped into silence my whole life, deliberately, without apology. The morning sunlight hit the glass walls of Hale Holdings like a warning. This was no longer their closed-door club. I didn't rush. Every click of my heel echoed like punctuation. Calm. Measured. They looked up one by one. Confused faces. Blythe didn't even bother to hide her smirk. "You're lost," she muttered. I didn't respond. Just laid the black leather folder on the table and opened it. Contracts, receipts, equity documents lined in sharp rows. Chairperson Dalton cleared his throat. "Ms. Sloan, shareholder," he said formally. That was the first time someone in this room acknowledged me without shrinking me. I gave a nod. Not to thank him, but to mark the shift. Inside, I told myself, you stop looking for apologies when you know you deserve accountability instead. We got through the first 10 minutes of standard agenda items before I raised my hand. I'd like to motion for a reevaluation of our intellectual property history, specifically around the design portfolio developed between 2013 and 2018. Blythe leaned back, annoyed. That was under my leadership, she said. Copyrights were filed under my role as creative lead. I didn't blink. And I'd like that claim evaluated against these. I pushed forward the timestamped files. Photoshop metadata. Client receipts. Email logs. Originals. All with my signature. Cameron's face appeared on the screen behind me. She joined remotely, in full attorney mode. "We've authenticated every piece," she said. "There is no ambiguity." The air in the room shifted. One board member whispered, "She's been holding this back. Waiting." I let them sit in it. I didn't need to argue. The facts spoke. And they were loud. Then Blythe cracked. She leaned forward, her voice sharp. "This is just another emotional crusade. You've always been unstable. You were obsessed with control, not design." I kept my voice low. "Facts don't depend on my mood. But lies tend to." I pulled out an old internal proposal Randall had once scribbled on, near as edge as her silence. "We'll use it." I read it slowly. Delton's brow tightened. Some of the board looked away. But a few. They leaned in. Something shifted. I looked around the table. "I'm not here for sympathy," I said. "I'm here for recognition. And I hold the shares to demand it." I passed around the motion. Independent review of all family branding credit claims. There was silence. Then, Delton nodded. "We'll vote." The room emptied slowly. Randall didn't say a word. Lorraine avoided my eyes. Blythe looked like she had more venom to spill, but Delton tapped his gavel before she could open her mouth again. I stood first. "Thank you for your time." Walked out just like I walked in, no hesitation. In the elevator down, I didn't smile. Just breathed. Deep. This wasn't a win. It was a crack. A shift. Justice doesn't always roar, I told myself. Sometimes it just walks in with receipts. By the time I hit the street, the sun was high. I pulled my sunglasses on. Let the heat wrap around me like armor. An hour later, I got the text. No name. Just, "They're planning something." Attached was a voice memo. I hesitated. Pressed play. Blythe's voice, "She may think she's winning. But we still own the narrative." I didn't flinch. Didn't pause. Just muttered, "Then I guess it's time I told my side publicly." I sat at the desk in my new Austin office late that evening, the city lights painting thin strips of silver on the wall behind me. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. Empty bookshelves. A single file cabinet. The air felt hollow, like the victory I thought I had already won was just an echo. Not a rush. Just waiting. I pulled out the company badge, my old badge. The one that used to grant me access to the Hale building without a second glance. I swiped it. Red light. Pulsing. Access denied. I stood up, walked over to the drawer labeled Archive, and dropped the badge inside. It landed with a muted thump. My old identity. Archived. I reminded myself of a phrase, "You must leave the game to change the rules." Behind me hung the plaque, Founder, Blythe Carson. My design, framed under someone else's name. I froze a moment, looked at it. Then I saw the paperclip holding the glass in place, the fingerprint I left when I mounted it months ago, quiet evidence. That's when I made a decision. If staying meant playing by their rules, leaving meant writing my own. The next morning I sat in front of my computer. There was a video screen of the family company's memorial wall. I played it. Around the 0:45 mark I heard the narrator say, "Blythe Carson led the campaign," while an image of my late-night blueprint flashed on screen. My name, missing. Just a photo of me receiving my award silently faded into view. I felt the ground shift. They didn't just forget me. They made me invisible. I called the intern who once managed internal systems. She told me softly, "I saw your name there before." They pulled it. I listened. My chest felt hollow, not shock, but anger wrapped in cold logic. I was part of their story, once. Now I wasn't. If they could delete me, they could rewrite my legacy. But I hadn't stopped keeping receipts. Later that day I drove past the Hale Holdings building. I used to pull in confidently through the side gate. I tried the guest badge now. Denied again. The security guard looked at me with mild surprise. "You should have second-level clearance, Ms. Sloan." I held my voice steady, "I do." But someone revoked it. I didn't wait for a response. I walked away. From inside, the tall glass tower seemed less like a castle and more like a cage I helped build. Back in my apartment, rain tapped the window like quiet applause. I sat on the couch, comparing two badges, one expired, faded, the other still crisp but inactive. I realized something: your presence is your protest. So I didn't need to storm in screaming. I needed to show up in other ways. The silver handkerchief my father kept at his pocket came to mind. He said he'd never lose it. He did. But I held on. I opened the brokerage account on my laptop. Typed in my instructions, schedule purchase of shares in Hale Holdings. Silent stake. Irrevocable. I stared at the screen until the confirmation popped up. My final thought: they thought my silence was surrender. They were wrong. Morning traffic snarled outside the Hale Holdings tower as I climbed the steps into the downtown lobby. My blazer was crisp, my heels firm on the tiles, and my pulse, a steady beat of purpose, not fear. This wasn't a return, it was a takeover. I carried a file rather than a feeling. Inside the boardroom, the presence shifted. Blythe gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The usual power players, used to nodding at her every word, glanced at me, some with curiosity, others with discomfort. Chairperson Delton tapped his gavel. "Ms. Sloan," he said, "welcome as stakeholder." I sat down, placed my black leather folder on the polished surface, and unzipped it. Contracts, share receipts, time-stamped PDFs, the foundation of my case. When your history is rewritten, standing up is your first eruption. The first packet went around. The cover read Robbie Carson, Design Liaison. I waited until silence gathered like storm clouds. Then I spoke, "It's Nerea Sloan, and it always was." Brown's eyes flicked. Blythe's cheeks tightened. Someone whispered, "Typo?" I held still. "Some typos cost millions," I said. Then I delivered the timeline, 5 years of credits, name changes, metadata showing my initials on designs carried by the company. Eyes widened. One man cleared his throat, he knew. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was identity. Next, Blythe rose. "We should recognize Nerea's contributions and logistics support." She paused, searching for support, and he nodded. I interrupted. "Support? You said I designed the rollout model that made us public. I secured the clients. I built the strategy." I flipped a slide full of benchmarks, my benchmarks, and kneeled. The room tilted. Delton leaned forward. We'll engage an independent audit of our executive credit history. I felt vindication, yes. And a weight. Truth is heavier than suffering. When the gavel fell, I rose. Calm. Thank you. I walked out first. My heels echoed. I passed Blythe's stunned gaze. The hallway light felt warmer than the room. On the elevator, my phone buzzed. Hale Holdings shares down 3% on audit announcement. I didn't cheer. Just inhaled. They built the tower. I changed the foundation. The wind was cooler up there, high above the city. Rooftop lights shimmered against the skyline. I stepped out from the penthouse onto the terrace, alone for a moment, then all eyes turned. Colleagues. Former bosses. Investors who once shook my hand without seeing me. Now they whispered behind flutes of champagne. Let them. I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. From across the rooftop, the Sloan Designs logo was reflected in the glass of the building across the street, bold, backlit, unshaken. I took that in with a slow breath. The same way I once watched my name be erased from plaques, proposals, and presentations. But not tonight. Blythe stood near the center of the terrace, smile tight. I offered a nod, nothing more. If she was waiting for a scene, she'd be disappointed. That version of me had died quietly. This version? This version stood without apology. They told me I was nothing, I thought. But tonight, their silence speaks louder than their history ever did. The air buzzed with soft jazz and networking chatter. But underneath it, I felt something shift. The celebration was about success. Mine. And yet, this wasn't just a party. It was a reckoning dressed in silk. I walked toward the mic stand near the balcony rail. The event host paused his toast, stepping aside. I took the mic. A hush. When I first walked into this company, I began, eyes scanning the crowd. I carried my designs in a worn notebook. Tonight I walk into it with full ownership. I tapped a remote. Behind me, the projection screen lit up, images, documents, client emails, all tagged with my name. No ambiguity. No debate. The slideshow rolled. Faces turned quiet. Blythe's smile stiffened. My mother turned toward my father, who looked down. I paused, then delivered it. Today, the company recognizes me for what I always was, not what I was told to be. Applause didn't erupt, it built. Slowly. Steadily. And not from obligation or pity. But respect. I stood there and received it. Not with pride. With clarity. Then I handed out copies of the amended legacy contract. Each printed, signed, and notarized, dated last week. My voice remained even. I've activated the founding clause. I now hold the title of founding designer, with a 20% equity stake. A ripple moved through the room, shocked mutters, exchanged glances. Delton nodded quietly. The shift was not only in the room, it was now on paper. I met Blythe's eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her face carried what her words no longer could. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Design, I said, is not just color and typeface. It's identity. And identity, once stolen, must be reclaimed. As I walked away from the mic, a few guests approached with cautious smiles. Some offered congratulations. Others looked unsure where they now stood. I didn't hold it against them. Later, alone at the terrace edge, the cold kissed my face. I breathed in. Power, I've learned, isn't comfort. It's the permission to write your own terms. I typed a message to Cameron. Let's schedule the press release. We're live. I touched the small silver pin on my lapel, the old handkerchief from years ago, folded, now cast in metal. What was once my apology to myself had become a marker of something far greater. They built their empire on my hands. I now owned the keys to its new direction. The night ended. I slipped into the back seat of a sleek black car. The door closed with finality. My phone buzzed. A headline draft, Sloane's sister rewrites family empire. I looked out at the city, glowing like an open ledger waiting for new names. They laughed, I whispered. I listened. Now they'll know, I was always rising. 2 weeks have passed since the gala. The city moves beneath me each morning, slow and unaware, like nothing monumental ever happened. I sit on my balcony with a mug of black coffee, watching the early sun stretch itself across the rooftops. There is no applause here. No cameras. Just air, quiet and unbroken. This is the first time in my life that silence doesn't feel like punishment. I used to chase recognition. Now I understand, success is loud, but peace speaks in a whisper. The Penthouse still carries faint traces of the celebration, an empty glass on the counter, a folded linen napkin. But it feels different now. Say. No signature. No request for forgiveness. Just a statement of surrender. I fold it once and slide it into the drawer of my desk. I won't frame it. I won't destroy it. Some things deserve neither display nor reply. Closure isn't always a door that closes. Sometimes it's a hallway you walk past. I spend the next days redesigning the Penthouse, not to impress, but to reflect. No gold trims, no glass excess. Just walnut wood, muted tones, walls lined with concept art that never saw daylight. I accept a teaching invitation at the Design University downtown. Not to step back, but to step beyond. Once a week, I sit with young designers who think no one sees them. I let them speak. I tell them credit is oxygen, don't let anyone steal your breath. One evening, a neighbor in the elevator glances at me. Aren't you that designer from the family scandal? I shake my head gently. No, I reply. I'm the woman from my own story. It feels honest. On my desk, beside the letter, sits an envelope with a red seal. A new invitation, Women's Leadership Summit, New York. They want me to speak on legacy and authorship. I rest my hand on it without opening. There was a time I would have gone to prove something. Now, I'll go to build something. I stand by the window as dusk spills across the skyline. My name is on the contract, the company, the building across the street. But none of that defines me now. I learned something in the quiet, rising isn't about standing above them. It's about standing without them. They tried to erase my name. I wrote it in ink. And when the world asked me who I was, I finally answered.